This bolt should not find any place on the race car. This is for fixing a plow or some shit like that. I don't have threads on any part of the tab, which is a total no-no. I mean, you want to stay away from that at all times. And then it's going to start beating on the hole. Okay, so next thing you know, you're trying to put preload in this thing and it's all over the place. And then there's no loading it to one side. Now you fuck this bracket up. You can't adjust a car like that. I mean, it's going to be all over the place. Have some quality tools, all right? If you guys are using some kind of brand that you bought the whole set for $39 down at the hardware store, throw that shit in the trash. If you grab this with a 12 point, and if my guys do that here, I just hit them in the face with a piece of tubing, all right? Hey guys, Tim McCamus here. We're gonna do a little short segment on some hardware tonight, and we have lots of different fastening hardware, so I wanted to go over some of the differences in it and what they should and shouldn't be used for. If you're putting your own car together or doing some changes on, or maybe you're building it from scratch, maybe you got a chassis kit and you're building the complete project yourself, big project undertake. But if you're building a nice car, there's nothing better than to use some really nice trick hardware on it, like some bolts and fasteners to just to finish it off. And I'm talking about, you know, really nice fits and nice head configurations, the correct length, all that stuff. So I've got an assortment of it laid out here, and I'm going to go over a couple of things with you that might be good for you to think about. So this silver bolt here, this is a 1/2 inch diameter, but this is a standard grade 5 bolt, okay? You can find this at any Home Depot or Lowe's or Orscheln's or any other farm hardware store that's close to you. It's got 3 little tags on the head here, 3 little dashes, okay? That means it's grade 5. So it's a softer material. Now, we do have some of this stuff in our shop, but we just use it for fixing the farm tractors and shit with. So this bolt should not find any place on the race car. This is for fixing a plow or some shit like that. So grade 5 hardware, silver bolt like this, coarse thread, varying lengths of threads. Not going to use that on the race car, okay? So don't go down to Rural King and get you one of these bolts, bolt your 4-link together with it. Not the correct part, okay? So we're going to throw that thing aside. We don't use that. So what's left here is a series of different fasteners. We've got some standard grade 8 hardware, okay, which you can still find at the farm store, but it does have a place, a few places, not many. We've got grade 8, we've got AN bolts, we've got NAS bolts, we've got MS bolts, and then we have some miscellaneous nuts and washers here. So let's start with the grade 8 stuff. So like I said, the grade 8 hardware is going to be identified with the same type of hashes on the head, okay, just like the grade 5 is. Grade 5 has 3, grade 8 has 6 hash marks on the head, okay? They'll all be the same. They're going to be lined up with the points on the hex part of it. Now you can see this is a 1/2 inch fastener here, but it's all thread. So again, we would use this for fixtures and things that we're bolting together around the shop, maybe on the table or something that we're doing a jig or fixture with. We'll use some grade 8 hardware. It doesn't really find its place on a car anywhere. There's not many places on the chassis that we would consider using this, mostly because a bolt like this is going to be all thread. You know, this bolt here is about 1.5 inches long, and it's just thread from top to bottom, no shoulder. This is a little longer version of that same bolt, and it's just got a standard shoulder and then a lot of threads on it, okay? And we're going to get into a little bit later why that's important. So I've got a bunch of different ones here that are all grade 8, but you can kind of tell they're the same. They have kind of a standard shoulder length and a standard thread length. So if we're going to step up from the grade 8 hardware, so we use strictly AN and NAS and MS hardware on all of our stuff. So these are all like military and aerospace standard, okay? So AN is going to be, there's a little bit of discrepancy on this. It stands for Air Force, Navy, or Army, Navy, depending on who you ask, but that is a standard And then NAS is going to be aerospace, so it's going to be a National Aerospace Standard. All right, so that's NAS. And then there's MS, which is a military standard, okay? So it's a military spec. Now, the AN is going to be identified. It'll have some, almost all the time, it has a flat, smooth head with some letter markings on it. And the nice thing about the AN and NAS hardware is you can purchase them. So if you go down to Farm Boy's tractor store here and get you a grade 8 bolt, if you want it 2 inches long, you don't have any choice here. It's going to come with a generic shoulder length and threads. You don't get to pick, okay? So when we're doing some fastening on these race cars, almost always on every part of the chassis, the shoulder length should be consistent going through all of the hardware that you're fastening. Okay, so let's take, for instance, we got a 1/2 inch rod end here, and we've got a couple lower control arm tabs. So we're going to use a bolt similar to this. Actually, we're going to use something like this. So what we do is here, see how the difference is on this is a 1/2 inch bolt here, but it's got a long shoulder length and a short thread length. And so what we want is we'd like that shoulder to be completely through all this hardware here. And if you can see this one, I'm going to switch this out. So I'm going to use this one here because the shoulder length is right for this. Okay, so if I put this together now, I've got shoulder through the tab, through the rod end, and through the tab. I don't have threads on any part of the tab, which is a total no-no. I mean, you want to stay away from that at all times because these are under a lot of load. So you want to keep the threads out the end of the tab past where the nut's going to be. So this one is the right length, but there is just a touch of shoulder showing through that. So we're going to take these are all AN washers. We're going to take the correct 1/2 inch AN washer and we're going to put that on here, and then we're going to use this thin nylock nut. So we've got these gold thin nylock nuts, so all this hardware matches. So these NAS bolts can be identified by a dimple in the head. The AN are smooth on the head. Now, the tensile strength on AN somewhere around 120,000. I mean, you guys can look it up, but it's higher than a grade 8 hardware. NAS, the tensile strength is about 180,000. MS bolts around 160 to 180,000, depending on what grade of bolt you get. So this is a very high grade, very strong bolt, but one of the key benefits is that it has shoulder. All of the hardware here, all of the tabs and the rod end are riding completely on the shoulder, and it has a perfect fit. Okay, so this is all, there's no play in this at all. Well, if we use a grade 8 fastener here, like this piece of shit right here, see, we can put this together and do the same job. It's the same length, but see, all this stuff is loose now. And it's not going to take any load on this to start beating the threads out. All right, so it's going to start eating on those threads a little bit because they're just little pointed threads that are going to start getting chewed up by the tab. You can get this put together and you could put a washer and put this nut on here and it will look okay, but these are nice cars we're putting together, okay? This is not some barnyard junk you're throwing together with some hardware you can get down the street, okay? So you need to think about the hardware that you want to use. So for like a lower control arm and 4-link, we're going to use NAS hardware. So we're going to use this dimple type bolt. And then we're going to use, and I'll show you a little difference here. So this one has the correct shoulder length, but it's got too many threads, okay? So there's a little bit of shoulder here. We're going to put a washer on this side. And these NAS bolts, you can put a washer on this side, but underneath the head of an NAS bolt, they have a washer step machined into that head. So you don't have to put a washer on this side. So we can put this together. And now if I do this, so I'm going to put this thin nut on here, because I mean, I could put a thick nut on there and look like shit, but I'm going to use this real thin gold nut, and I'm going to have about 6 or 7 threads sticking out. So what we're going to do with this, because our shoulder length is right, we're going to put this up in one of our CNC machines, and we're going to machine off the end of this bolt. I cannot stand bolts that stick out past the nut. So our rule is 1 to 2 threads past the nylock, okay? So I don't want to have it too short, but I want to have 1 or 2 threads sticking out past the nylock portion of that nut. So when I put this whole package together, it looks like you spent some time and thought it out and picked the right hardware, okay? So that's especially important. I mean, now this control arm's not going to have any type of load on it compared to the 4-link, okay? So I'm going to grab a 4-link bracket here. Let's just say this is just a front bracket here. So we've got this one has 5/8 and 1/2 inch bolts in it. So this is especially important on the 4-link because you definitely don't want any threads. So you can take like this 1/2 inch bolt here and use it and put it in like this with that rod end. Now this side's going to be on the shoulder, this side's going to have threads on it. So the first time you run this, especially on a top bar, you're pulling on that, pushing on the bottom, going to beat these threads right out of it. So it's going to beat the threads out no matter how tight you tighten it up, and then it's going to start beating on the hole. Okay, so next thing you know, you're trying to put preload in this thing and it's all over the place, like this rod end's moving in and out here. You can't tighten it up enough, okay, and then there's no loading it to one side. Now you fucked this bracket up. So what we want to have is a nice fit, a nice reamed hole and a nice fit on the shoulder. So we're not going to use this grade 8. We're going to use something like this 1/2 inch bolt here, and the shoulder is going to go completely through one bracket, through the rod end and through the other side, and then washer and nut, okay? And these NAS bolts, you can see I've got a couple of 1/2 inch ones here, and the nice thing about these is you can buy them specifically based on the series of NAS bolt, how much your grip length is. So this will be your grip length, which will be your shoulder, so that's what you want to grip on, and then your thread length. So you can buy this instead of saying, okay, I want this is going to be 1.5 inches long and I'm going to get what I get here. You can specifically pick the shoulder grip and the thread length. So you can get it exactly like you want. And even if you can't get it exactly like you want, you can get like a bolt like this and machine the ends of the threads off to get exactly what you want. Because some of this stuff's really hard to come up with a package that fits exactly right and doesn't have too much thread sticking out the end, because that just looks like crap. So we're going to use something like that, and we'll use this thin nylock on the end of that with a washer. And like I said, you can put, if you got a little too much shoulder sticking out here, you can put a washer on this side and a washer on this side. And these are AN washers, okay? These are the proper washers for these bolts. They're not washers from the hardware store, okay? You can't run down to your local hardware store or your local farm store and get stuff like this. These are properly fitted to these bolts, okay? So this fits nice and tight. You know, a normal flat washer is really loose on the bolt. These fit nice and tight, and their outside diameter is not large. So the thing, you know, because this is a 5/8 bolt, you know, if you go down and get a washer from the farm store with a 5/8 hole in it, thing's going to be about 2 inches in diameter, all right? This is the right washer. These are called AN washers, okay? This is an AN washer, and I've got several sizes of them here. So, and they also come in thick and thin, okay? They have a thin version, which is half the thickness. So this one's thin and this one's a little thicker. So you can tailor these things to get exactly what you want. And I have this steering joint out here because I want to show you this bolt here. So this is what we use in this joint, all right? So this is a steering joint. Now you're going to have a 3/4 tube slip in here, and you're going to drill this for a 1/4 inch hole. And you can use the grade 8 bolt to stick through here, and it's going to look something like this, okay? That bolt that's this right length is going to look something like that. This bolt's too long, but that's what it's going to look like. So one side's going to have a shoulder riding on it. The other side is going to have threads in this 1/4 inch hole. Now, these threads are going to be barely 1/4 inch on the points, but by the time you turn the steering wheel, let's say you've got 3 or so, probably 3 joints in the steering column. So you've got a bolt in each side. So you've got 6 bolts in here. If you're using some piece of crap like this, pretty soon then you've got play in that steering, okay? So you're turning the wheel like if you grab hold of the steering wheel in one of our chassis, it's firm, it's perfect, there's no slop in it. It's because we use this NAS bolt, okay? This little dimple head NAS. It's got the right shoulder length, and you see I'm going to stick that on there just like that, and it's going to go all the way through, and that shoulder gets completely through to this other side. And then I'm going to use a thick washer, and then I'm going to use this nut. This is called a jet nut. It's kind of hard to see. This is a 3/8 jet nut. A jet nut is a little hat nut, okay? So it's got a washer type machine in the bottom of it, and it's going to be smaller in diameter than, you know, if you use a 3/8 bolt, normally you're going to have a 9/16 wrench to put on that nut, the hex head, okay? This is going to be smaller. This is a reduced head. So we're going to use this NAS bolt, and then we're going to use this 1/4" jet nut here, okay? So that's going to look something like that. And jet nuts are lock nuts too, but they're metal locking nuts. So this is a nylock. It's got a nylon ring or a fibrous ring in there. These jet nuts they're actually a little bit oblong. They're squeezed on the sides, so they metal lock. All right, so you got to be careful that you don't gall up the thread. You want to put a little lubricant on there when you tighten these down. But these will metal lock, so they'll lock themselves on. And this package here makes a nice finish. Okay, so when you look at this, it looks nice. You know, it doesn't look like you dug some shit out of the old coffee can you had in the back of the shop and found a couple 1/4" bolts that would fit. It's definitely not a grade 5 piece of crap. But this is a nice bolt, and it's the right bolt for this hardware, okay? It is really good. It's a hex head. I mean, you can use 12 point, which would be an MS bolt, and I'll show you that in a second. But this bolt is perfect for this. Full shoulder contact through the outer sleeve here, through the tube that's in here, and then out the other side. So you've got shoulder to shoulder contact. And if you drill that and ream it, this bolt will slide right in there. There will be zero play. Put this jet nut on there, finish it off with this AN washer. Perfect fit, and it looks nice, okay? It looks like you spent some time to get the right hardware. So we've got a variety of stuff here. Again, these AN bolts are very good. You buy them too by the grip and the thread length. So they're not as precision as the NAS. The NAS, you have a lot better selection in shoulder versus thread because, again, you know, this is a 1/2" bolt, this is a 1/2" bolt. You can see the difference in the amount of thread because this is just whatever the standard is going to be for a grade 8 bolt. When you get to the 4-link stuff, you know, that's when it's important to have the right bolts in there. So you've got specific points on the car that you could probably slide by with some grade 8 hardware, but you're building a nice car, you're taking all this time to buy nice fasteners and you're spending a bunch of money on this thing. It doesn't cost that much to put really good hardware on it, really good bolts and nuts that look like you spent some time instead of just whatever you had in your bolt assortment at your shop. So this one is a 12-point head, and like I said, this is an MS bolt, so still a very high tensile strength, and you still buy it by the grip and the thread length. Okay, you don't know your overall is going to be the combination of the both, but when you purchase it, you spec it out, and I'm just going to tell you guys something simple. The bolt length is measured from underneath the head all the way to the end. That's your overall length. But when you buy this, you buy it by shoulder length and thread length. All right, and if you need to modify it a little bit, that's fine. Put it up in a mill, take it to somebody you know, tell them how much you want to cut off of it, cut it off, chamfer the end. It'll be exactly right fit and length for your application. So there's a lot of stuff going on here, but we have all this hardware. We have tons of hardware. I'm going to call out some of this grade 8 stuff here, but we have everything in NAS from 1/4" on up, and AN also, and jet nut sizes. We've got every size of jet nut, every size of AN washer, thick and thin. You can check that out on our website. But again, you know, you guys are building you're building a nice car. You're taking your time. You put a lot of hours in it. You put a lot of effort in it to make it perfect. And not only from an aesthetic standpoint, but also from the performance end. I mean, like especially in the 4-link, okay? If you have to skimp on something and you don't have the correct right bolt for the lower control arm, it's probably not as big a deal, but you have to be adamant about these 4-link bolts, okay? Because this is going to be under a lot of load. And once you put the wrong fastener in here and beat this hole out, this thing's welded in, okay? Now it becomes a major problem. And we're going to touch on that in another video on doublers, but we're not going to talk about that right now. So start off with the right hardware, save yourselves a lot of headaches. So when you are adjusting the preload on the car, you don't have to put 5 flats in it before you pull all the slop out of the hole. I mean, we've seen cars come in here and you can, whatever hole they've been running in, some of these holes are stretched out almost half, again, the diameter of the hole, and they're ready to pull this bracket out here. So you can't adjust a car like that. I mean, it's going to be all over the place. There's no way to set the preload that it's not going to work properly. You've got to have the right fasteners in the 4-link, in the wishbone, in the wheelie bars. That stuff is important to have the right fasteners in, because that's going to affect how the car works. And again, this stuff's not very, obviously an NAS bolt's higher than a grade 8 bolt, but in the overall picture of how much these cars cost to build, this is not that expensive to do. And these hardware packages, when you're done, you will be so much happier with the end result because you've chose the right fastener. And you know what? Another thing you need to do is have the right tools when you're putting this stuff in, because this stuff's all plated. The tolerance is very tight on these. So this shoulder has a very exact fitment. So on a grade 8 1/2-inch bolt, you've got a wide range of fitment that goes from below 1/2 inch to over 1/2 inch, mostly below. But on these NAS and ANs, they're really tight on their tolerance, and the finish on this NAS bolt is very smooth, and the plating is light because of that tolerance. So when you install these, you're going to want to use the right wrench and the right ratchet. If you're going to use a ratchet to tighten this down, don't use a 12-point socket on this nut. Okay, use a 6-point. If you're going to hold this with a wrench, have some quality tools, all right? If you guys are using some Chinese fucking junk that, some kind of brand that you bought the whole set for $39 down at the hardware store, throw that shit in the trash, because you want a wrench that fits this tight. You want to, fits like a snap-on wrench will fit this really tight. And it'll have a nice smooth finish to it, and it'll fit the bolt exactly. So when you do tighten it up, you won't round off these points or look like you used a pair of channel locks or something to tighten this thing down with. So you want to use the right tools, because the hardware is expensive, and you want to also use a quality tool and the right socket for the job. So like if you grab this, I don't even care if you use a snap-on socket. If you grab this with a 12-point, and if my guys do that here, I just hit them in the face with a piece of tubing, all right? Because you're going to have a little mark on each corner here where that 12-point has turned a little bit and bit into that. So you want to use a 6-point where it's got a flat surface and protect that edge as much as possible. So, I mean, I hate junk tools, so we don't use any imported garbage tools here. I mean, we like USA made tools, and we like them to fit right. They don't all have to be USA, so I'm not dogging on some of the stuff. There's some nice tools made in Germany. We have we have some German tools that are very high end, but Snap-on, Matco, some of that stuff, mostly all made in the USA, it fits really good on this head. Okay, you grab some Craftsman wrench that been made over in Changfeng, it's not going to fit right. It's going to be sloppy on here. So next thing you know, this bolt that you just paid a bunch of money for is going to have all the corners rounded off of it. So along with using nice hardware, you need to use quality tools to put it together, and preferably quality USA made tools. But again, we've got some Italian made tools here and some German made stuff, very, very high quality, and we love that stuff. So we're not against imported tools, just imported junk, okay? If this stuff's been laying around in your toolbox and it says made in China on it or something, just throw it in the trash, all right? It's just throw it somewhere, give it to somebody. Don't put your car together with that junk. Use some nice quality tools. Go spend some money on a set of Snap-on wrenches that fit the head right. So again, we've got a lot of hardware. If you have questions on it, you can talk to our guys up front, and they will line you out on it, and you can look at our website and get some different sizes and stuff. If we don't have the size you want, we can easily get it, because we have a huge selection of this stuff, and we get bolts in every day. So give us a call, let us help you out. Again, the details on putting these cars together. The more time you spend on them and the more work you put into it, the better the finished product. So don't skimp at the end and go down and buy your hardware by the pound, okay? That's not what we do to put these cars together. Buy a bolt that fits the source and fits the product and fits the hole, and use some good tools to put it together. That's all I got. You guys have a good day, and we'll talk to you later.